Ms. Rodas, you reported to the Inspector General at the Department of Justice and HHS that children were placed by the Office of Refugee Resettlement and its contractor Cherokee Federal in the hands of a sponsor connected with the violent MS-13 gang. Based on records you've provided, the placement was done after you warned HHS. Now, I've obtained a statement from another employee to substantiate your shocking allegations. Now, I think you spoke to this in your opening statement, but let me ask this question. If you want to add anything that you didn't have time to add, you can. Could you describe in more detail the placement of children with sponsor connected to a violent gang and the retaliation you endured after you reported this placement to the Inspector General? Would you like to speak more to that subject, or have you said all you can on that point?
I'd be happy to tell you more, Senator, and I would like to again thank you for your commitment to whistleblowers. Thank you. So early in the morning on September 3rd of 2021, I sent out an urgent do not release advisory. It was for two 13-year-old children who were being sponsored by an MS-13 affiliated sponsor in Ohio. The advisory went out to HHQ staff. It went out to the Pomona staff. It went out to Cherokee Federal Contract staff, OTIP, HHS, OIG, and Homeland Security Investigations. Now, sadly, despite my urgent do not release advisory, one of the children was released to this gang-affiliated sponsor. Now, my husband is from El Salvador, and I understand the horrific things that the violent gang MS-13 does to children. So it was quite a shock to realize that the U.S. government knowingly was sending a child into the hands of gangs. So I made the decision to take a different pathway, and that's when I reached out directly to the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Justice, the Honorable Michael Horowitz. And over the next few days, I made 4 protected disclosures, 2 to the Department of Justice OIG and 2 to the HHS OIG. This resulted, I'm sad to say, in lightning speed retaliation. After just 10 days after my first protected disclosure, I was taken off the MS-13 case. The following day, I received an email from a masked headquarters, HHS headquarters. It was a UAC migration email that we used for submitting trafficking cases. I suddenly received an email from them, and they outed me to the entire site that I had been in contact with the OIG. So they copied HHS staff, all my on-site colleagues. I mean, they outed me as a whistleblower. And just 5 days after that, on September 21st of 2021, as cover for action, they falsely accused me of wrongdoing. I was instructed to clean out my work area of all my personal belongings in front of my peers. I was escorted off the site by the federal field specialist and security. I was told I was under investigation. When we reached the guard station for badging out, my badge was taken by security. And as I had mentioned, for my personal safety, my home agency offered to send armed agents to escort me from California back to Washington, D.C. I can assure you it was a harrowing journey that no whistleblower should have to go through, no whistleblower. So again, Senator Grassley, I thank you for the question, and I thank you for your support of whistleblowers.
Okay, one follow-up. When you were at your HHS facility in California, what training, if any, did HHS require on how to identify and prevent trafficking?
Well, sadly, you want me to start? Sorry. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement is not a law enforcement organization or an investigative agency. So I think that's something we really need people to understand. HHS is not investigative. So they have a decade, though, of evidence showing they're incapable of identifying trafficking concerns, documenting those concerns, and then reporting. And further, their refusal to share information with law enforcement is going to continue to result in children being put with dangerous sponsors who abuse and exploit them. There's not sufficient training for them to be able to tackle this mission, to properly report it, so that children are protected.
Right, and to further answer the question, sir, What training, if any, did HHS require on how to identify and prevent trafficking? None. As a matter of fact, there weren't any types of training, not document fraud training, not trafficking training, not sponsor vetting training, nothing, which is why I took it upon myself to create trainings to equip the case managers that were well-meaning, but without training on how to do their job. There was no practical application or operational hands-on training, period. That's why there were complete and utter chaos in the case management division, and that's why children ended up in the hands of traffickers, amplified by the fact that many case managers had no idea how to safely process these children because they had just answered an ad on Indeed or attended a hiring event at the hotel next door, only to be brought on the next day with no training, and in some cases without cleared background checks. One could argue that this many pervasive failures could only be the product of system by design. HHS knows there is zero accountability once the children leave their facility, which is why speed is consistently prevailing over safety. So much so that teams called the strike teams I talked about earlier were established to move children out faster. Many times, a case manager would arrive at work on Monday morning only to find out that one of their children had been ripped away and shipped out before they could conclude their findings.
Rodas and White. The Unaccompanied Children's Portal houses the Office of Refugee Resettlement, information about migrant children, and contains valuable data that can be used to find missing and exploited kids. Did you encounter any barriers to sharing information from the Unaccompanied Children Portal with law enforcement when you identified kids you believe were being trafficked?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So there was zero training on how to identify document fraud and prevent trafficking, both of which were prevalent in the HHS ORR Unaccompanied Children's Program and has been for over 15 years. When I alerted HHS on the first case of trafficking, I found out that the only way to share data with law enforcement was to painfully piecemeal UAC portal screenshots together and time-consumingly put together narratives and PowerPoints that explained each case's findings so that law enforcement could begin to understand the evidence they were looking at. This method was painfully slow, completely archaic, woefully ineffective and inefficient. A special agent investigating a case even asked me if there was an ally on the HHS side that would be willing to speak to him, because HHS normally does not release any information to law enforcement. I found this absolutely appalling. If HHS truly had nothing to hide and truly cared about the safety of these children, they would willingly allow the Inspector General and law enforcement to have full access to the portal, eliminating time-consuming bureaucratic red tape processes for child-protecting, life-saving data. But that was not the case, and that's not the case now. HHS does not want law enforcement to have portal access because that would expose their criminal and intentional negligence, and that's not good. That's not good for a taxpayer-funded multi-billion-dollar program which claims to care for children. Please make no mistake, the Inspector General and law enforcement are at the complete mercy of the information giver, HHS ORR, who will not give them information or access to the portal to investigate. Why? Because this would cripple their program if law enforcement and the American people could really see the extent of the criminal behavior.
As a follow-on, it cannot be emphasized enough that HHS is not law enforcement. They are not an investigative agency, but they do have an oversight agency, HHS OIG. And I can tell you, it was the shock of my life sitting on the Pomona Fairplex, finally getting authorization to share cases. And I get on the phone with a special agent, and I'm like, here's the A number. And they're like, A number? We don't have access to the portal. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have access to the portal? How do you have any oversight of the program? And they told me, they said, Tara, we're gonna have to open up a Kiteworks sharing session and you're gonna have to send me stuff. And I was stunned, I'm still stunned, when I tell people that no one has access to the UAC portal and therefore cannot investigate these cases. People still do not believe it. But make no mistake about it, they have been stonewalling congressional oversight, and they are stonewalling the oversight of their own agency. HHS OIG has no ability to directly access and look at the case files of children who we suspected of being trafficked.